Welcome to our second edition of the Africa Today broadcast. On this episode, we will be focusing on the reality of colonialism. Colonialism is when a different power, a foreign state or government, takes over the social, political, and economic facets of another country and extends their culture and takes charge of the economics, the policies in economics, in the social and the political realm. Now, on this episode, we will be asking ourselves the profound question: how independent is the African continent? Because every year, different states across the African continent celebrate the achievement of independence from the European and Arab nations that colonized us in ancient times. And during the time of independence celebrations, people are all over the street making different kinds of events in memory of the time in history when their different states achieved, in quotes, independence from the Western imperial forces. We ask ourselves today, what is it about colonialism that we have to celebrate? Are we, in fact, independent? Do we have reason to celebrate when, to this very day, we do not have complete control of our economics, of our politics, our social and cultural facets of society? Because we know that African budgets, national budgets, more than 50% of them are financed by the very people that we claim to have obtained independence from. So the irony about celebration of independence is we are a continent, at the most, that is at the very least independent, because we seem to always find ourselves at the receiving end of everything. So today we will be hosting 3 people on the show just to share the thoughts on the state of Africa today in terms of independence. Do we have reason to celebrate independence? Because when we do these statistics, we will find out that African countries across the African continent cannot seem to make very solid decisions without any foreign interference. In fact, if you were to make any major move in the politics or economics or social realm, you have to consult with the so-called, international community of nations. So we will delve deep and ask ourselves if at all Africa and African countries have got reason to celebrate. Our narrative is not a narrative that we own. We have been portrayed as the sick and hopeless and dying continent. So if that is the case on the one hand, then what is it on the flip side that gives us the courage to go and celebrate, having allegedly obtained independence? Are we free from Britain? Are we free from Europe? Are we free economically, socially, and politically from the Americas and the Arab influence? If not, then we have got to start from this point forward and begin to reassess ourselves as African continents, because we are losing out trillions of dollars every year in the name of aid, because they give us aid and then they exploit our resources, go trade with them in Europe and wherever, and then give us the proceeds, part of the proceeds actually, as aid. So in fact, we are paying for our own aid, and then we pay for the aid as well. So here we are, more than 5 decades, allegedly celebrating our independence. So allow me to introduce one of my very good friends. I've worked with him several times, and we had him on the show in the previous episode, Phillip, to share with us his thoughts on how can we trace the reality of colonialism in Africa today. How is it manifest in our politics? How is it manifest in our economics? How is it manifest in our culture, in our academics, in our social realm of things? Because make no mistake about it, unless we deal with this reality, we shall be celebrating empty days of independence, because we are not yet independent. My brother Phillip, welcome to the Africa Today broadcast, the second edition.
Colonialism, even in the 21st century, still has an effect on the African continent, just as much as the legacy of slavery has an effect on us here in America, and how its lingering effects, even to this day, is still in the systems that's within America, just as much as colonialism is still affecting everyone on the African continent. But let's talk about that in the guise of history, because one thing that the white supremacist has done into African continent is to make sure that you don't know history, you aren't educated on the dealings, or even the kind of how you got to where you're at today. So we need to go back in time, way back in time, starting in 1876. There was a guy by the name of King Leopold II of Belgium. Now, people know about Adolf Hitler and what he has done to the Jewish people. And, people, as in reports that say that he has been part of murdering 6 million Jews. But do you know King Leopold murdered more Africans than Adolf Hitler? He murdered 10 million black people in the Congo because he had these rubber quotas. And if the people in the Congo did not meet the quota, he would chop their hand off. That's what he would do. Now imagine that. And the pictures are out there, and we could talk about King Leopold extensively in another program. But today we're talking about more so the colonialism and what led up to even we're going to get into your borders. So King Leopold, he ended up going to the African continent and forming the International African Association the same year that he got there in 1876. Now, he brought a guy there by the name of Henry Morton Stanley to join him in researching and civilizing the continent. Now, isn't that funny? A group of people from the Caucasus Mountains of Europe that was crawling on all fours in a cave, eating raw meat with a dog, trying to tell black people that I'm going to civilize you. When black people came up upon them, they weren't bathing. We showed them how to bathe. Do you know in European history that they was afraid of baths at one point in time? They was afraid of that. And the Moors that came out of North Africa, the Moors that are black, because see, North Africa wasn't Arab. They are invaders. They are not the people that belong on the African continent. They belong in the Middle East. The North African area was ran by the Moors. Okay. So the Moors in their conquest, they had went up to Europe. The Moors conquered parts of Europe as well for a long time, about 700 years or so. And they taught the Europeans to bathe because the Moors used to bathe morning and evening. They didn't do that. They was afraid of baths. They felt water would get them sick. You can look up their history because I've studied a lot into European history. Some of it is very, very sad. Some of it is downright nasty and sick. And a lot of them have not gotten away from their origin. But so it's quite funny how Leopold talking about he gonna civilize somebody when a lot of them today don't even still take baths. You see how they be dirty looking when they come up to the African continent, be looking very just homely. We call them dusty, and the term dusty means they don't have nothing going on with themselves. They don't have money. They don't have anything. They look dingy clothes. They just show up and look any kind of way, and we spot them a mile away. Unfortunately, they try to take advantage of people when they get to the African continent. So when he was trying to so-called civilize people who already was on the land for thousands upon thousands of years, and they had many, many African dynasties. So he got there and he wanted to start getting the resources, and he had imperialistic goals. Now, at the same time, between later 1878 to 1885, they had started the Congo Free State because he took over the Congo. Now, other European powers was hearing about all the resources, and they were looking for the gold. They were looking for timber. They were looking for ivory. They were looking for all the resources. So you start having people coming from Portugal, coming from Spain, coming from France, coming from Germany, all these different people. And they was trying to put their stake, Britain as well, coming there trying to get access to the resources. So it started causing conflicts between them. So King Leopold at the time say, listen, we can't have all this infighting with each other because we're all European. No matter what language you speak, we're European, we're white. White people don't need to be fighting each other. And see, that's one thing that Africans need to learn even to this day. And also black folks worldwide, not just them. When it comes to trying to take things from black people and African people, they will get together real quick, even if they're fighting each other, to make sure that they have access and they don't interrupt each other. But what we would do, we will allow other people to come into our neighborhoods, our countries, cause conflicts. Now we at each other's throats, causing coups, having genocides like in Rwanda, things like that. All these people coming in from the outside. So they had this conference called the Berlin Conference. It was actually started in 1884. It was also known as the Congo Conference, also known as the West Africa Conference as well. And you had multiple European, led nations there. At the end of the conference, they had divvied up what they felt is fair for all the different African nations. Now, we need to put this up on the screen so you can see this. So this is a map of the African colonies after the Berlin Conference in 1884. Okay. So the only place that was never colonized was Ethiopia. And the Italians tried so many times to try to colonize Ethiopia. They could not do it. And when I went to Ethiopia the first time, they pride themselves on not being colonized, and shout out to them. But as you can see on this map, after the Berlin Conference, you look at all the British territories and you look at it like this. Uganda was a British territory. I mean, we know that. Any place that's speaking English as a first language in that country, that's where the British were at. OK, so you have you look down where South Africa, you look at all these different places. Here, you look at where the Portuguese had their colonies. You look at the Spanish, they had, one colony. The Portuguese, had Angola. That's why they speak Portuguese there. We have the French, the West Africa. And to this day, they still colonize that part of the continent to this day. It's still neo-colonized. And anyone that don't know about that should really do the research on what's going on in West Africa. So you see the British had Ghana and there's many different ones. So you just see the map. OK, so if you look at it today and you look at all the stories about Africans getting free, they're having their independence. But are you really independent? I mean, because you are following a lot of rules and regulations that's still led by the Mzungu. Now, look at all the maps that's in the continent of Africa today. Most of the names of the countries still go by the colonial names. Now, let's look at the great Julius Malema. When he was trying to run for president of South Africa, he said the first thing that he was going to do was change the name from South Africa to Azania. He said the right name for that land. And I celebrated that when I heard him say that. I say, yes, I hope he win. And I was thoroughly disappointed. I was so disappointed that Malema did not win the presidency of South Africa. I was very disappointed. But, the EFF had picked up a lot of more seats in the parliament. And like I said, hopefully in the future, the EFF become the dominant party, because I love the EFF and what they're doing in South Africa. You look at Robert Mugabe, when he was fighting the white supremacists by the name of Ian Smith, when it was Rhodesia, and how Ian Smith treated the people, which was known as Rhodesia at that time period. Robert Mugabe was that warrior to help free his people. And one thing that Robert Mugabe done was say, you know what, we're not going to call this Rhodesia. No, this is what the white supremacists, this is what these colonialists put on us, these colonizers. So we're going to change the name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. Now, you see what's going on with Zimbabwe today. And some people talk about the legacy of Robert Mugabe, but if you really study that, you will see Robert Mugabe and what happened was all the West, the US and the UK with the sanctions, when he tried to give the land to his people, and how he kicked off 4,000 Mzungus off of land that didn't belong to them at all. It belonged to the people of Zimbabwe. How they sanctioned and crippled and destroyed the economy of Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe is in the condition that it's in due to the same colonizers. This is why a person like me don't understand that when they come into the African continent, some of you are smiling and happy to see them, and you thinking they got money and they're going to help you out, and and the good thing about people like myself who were taken from the African continent, and I don't know exactly where I come from. I don't know what ethnic group I was a part of, but what I'm happy about with that, I got to live in the belly of the beast. And this beast is the white supremacist system. And I understand who the white supremacists are. Now, Africans is naturally friendly, and that's great. That's a beautiful trait. Most of us throughout the world are loving people, and that is a great thing for us. And that is a horrible thing for us at the same time, because people take advantage of our great nature and good big hearts as black people worldwide. But we have to protect ourselves. You look at the lines, that's like we talk about the borders. Africans didn't set up the borders. They didn't set these borders up in the African continent. And Malema has said that we shouldn't even have borders. I agree with that. You shouldn't. I mean, they said that, even look at your form of government now. That's not an African form of government with parliament and all of that. That is a white form of government. You even still have laws on the books that the colonizer put down that you are still following. Last year or so, Rwanda got rid of a bunch of laws that was put in by the colonizers that was still on the books. I guarantee you every African nation, go through your books and look at all the laws that are put in by the colonizer. It's ridiculous. Even as a person that promotes Africa and definitely talks about people coming back home where our origination come from, some of the citizenship laws that put in that are ridiculous in some places wasn't even really put down by Africans like that. It was put in by the colonizers. And all of that must be looked at as well. So there's a lot of things that you're dealing with today and that's in operation in your countries is still linked to colonialism. So the best way for us, as just a solution to that, education is the best solution. I'm gonna tell you why. Once you start learning, and I'm telling you from personal experience, once I learned my history, once I learned who the white supremacists are and how they operate throughout the world, okay, it made me more sharp. It made me see them before they come. But if you are what we call deaf, dumb, and blind, and what we say, in other words, we're saying that you have no knowledge of what's going on in the world. You have no knowledge of what's going on with the white supremacists, how he's taking advantage, how he's stealing your resources, how he's, putting viruses in vaccines and giving it to African people. Like, for instance, there was no HIV on the African continent until they started bringing their vaccines into your continent. You can't trust them to put a needle in your arm. I always tell black people that. See, in America, a lot of us have woken up to that. But in your countries, don't let Bill Gates come in, his organizations, and start putting a needle in your arm. I've seen a picture of Bill Gates putting medicine in an African child's mouth. It made me just lose it, because Bill Gates has no medical degree. What is he doing? Inoculating people. See, we got to cut all this mess out. And see, these people think they can just come into the African continent, and some of you, not all, but some of you feel, well, they're coming to help. No, they're not. They're not coming to help you. They don't love you like that. They're coming to steal from you. They're coming to get something. Nobody is coming to the African continent to help you. The only people that going to help the African continent is the people that live there and people that in the diaspora want to come back to help make Africa a better place, okay, as a continent. None of these other people coming, the Chinese, the Indian, the Lebanese, the Mzungu, all of them not coming to help you. Some of them may come and say, hey, you know, I would like to do this. Oh, but they are the minority. The majority is coming to steal your gold. I saw a video out of Mali where while they fighting each other in Mali, the Mzungus are stealing the gold. That's what they do. They cause you to fight each other, and then they sit back and laugh at it while they're stealing your stuff at the same time. If you would focus on building relationships, putting down these so-called tribal beefs that's out there, because it's silly. When these people see us, we all one color. They don't care about what tribe you from. They don't care. We all black to them. I understand that we're different. Listen, I'm a black American. We have our own culture too here that we have created. Our culture throughout the world. And I will never walk away from my culture. And I don't expect you to walk away from your ethnic groups either. But for the sake of the whole, I will say, okay, we need to put whatever differences aside because we have a common enemy. And it's still that colonizer. We can't be smiling and letting them in. You know, these colonizers, like one of them showed up to Kenya with HIV and had, you know, sex with over 50 women and spread HIV to all these Kenyan women. See, stuff like that don't supposed to be going on. That's what I'm talking about. We got to stop with these smiling every time these colonizers show up and thinking they're going to give you something. They're not giving you nothing but a problem, and they come to steal from you. But we got to wake up. Make sure you understand the Berlin Conference was to carve up Africa to all these different people, as we have shown. And they still have access into the African continent. And unfortunately, your leaders that are on the continent are selling you out. And what I mean by selling you out is that they're taking money and then they're letting them get the resources while they're raping your countries and you get nothing. That has to stop. But education is the only thing that's going to stop it. And we got to continue to learn the history of the continent and how the white supremacists throughout the world has been effective at divide and conquer and theft of resources out of Africa.
Very profound thoughts and analysis from Brother Phil Scott. Thank you for that very elaborate analysis of the ancient evil of colonialism and how we can break free from this pandemic that is plaguing our economics and plaguing our social life and plaguing our political life. Well, now another very good friend of mine, he is an attorney. He is a practicing attorney. He is a business consultant, and he's a very Pan-African brother. Kamal Habar, you are welcome to the Africa Today broadcast. Share with us, please, what your thoughts are on how colonialism can be reversed and how we can trace it in ancient times and to this very day. Welcome to the show.
Colonialism has left Africa in an economically vulnerable position, where assets such as gold, diamonds, oil, rubber, bauxite, and other resources have been extracted from the continent by outside companies and countries, leaving very little of those profits to be shared with the African people. This set the stage for a post-colonial era that led to issues such as ethnic politicalization, which caused major human rights issues. This also led to issues when it came to financial capital and inefficiencies, leading to things like brain drain and extreme poverty. When we're talking about extreme poverty, the colonial and post-colonial financial systems have shut out over 326 Africans from basic things like getting a bank account. Here in the United States, there's a long track record of discriminatory practices disproportionately affecting Black people. Practices such as redlining, where banks would not extend loans to black families wanting to live in certain areas of a city. This robbed the American home market of over $218 billion. When we talk about the black worker, they have lost over $113 billion over the last 2 decades simply because they could not get a college degree. And black businesses have suffered far worse when it comes to access to capital. Not just black businesses, but the US economy has lost over $13 trillion simply because black entrepreneurs could not receive a small business loan. Now, if the racial wealth gap and other disparities were to be closed today, the United States could realize $5 trillion in gross domestic product. However, sadly, these practices don't appear to be ending anytime soon. So it's incumbent upon us to begin investing in ourselves and collaborating, especially in the areas of finance and technology. Web 3.0 is right around the corner, and it's time for us to be business participants in it instead of just consumers like we were with Web 1.0 and 2.0. One area of Web 3.0 that has particular promise is that of blockchain technology. Blockchain allows for data and records to move through a global network of computers using high-level encryption, thereby making it very difficult to alter or delete records. Blockchain is the same technology that powers Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Since it operates on a global network and is publicly available, it increases the level of transparency and accountability while simultaneously minimizing corruption. Blockchain technology has also seen the emergence or created the emergence of decentralized finance. Decentralized finance, or DeFi, allows for things such as borrowing, lending, savings, as well as digital asset trading and insurance products to operate outside of the traditional financial system. The other great thing about DeFi is it is accessible to anybody with an internet connection. This significantly lowers barriers to entry. However, there is a very small window of time before traditional banking it catches up and is going to leverage this technology to possibly continue the same tradition or the same predatory practices they have in the past. Since DeFi lives on the blockchain, we can assess as well as improve how we do business with one another. It also allows us to monitor how money is circulating amongst our communities in real time. It is vital for us to break the chains that traditional finance has lodged upon our shoulders. And we need to start doing it as soon as possible.
Welcome back from those profound and eye-opening views, thoughts, and opinions from our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Now, let me say this as we are closing. Africa is not a poor continent. That's a lie that has been built into our psychic from the time that we were young. We are still riding on the education system that was left behind by our former colonizers. What does the education system teach us? Go to school, and after school, look for a job and work yourself to death. I mean, that's the paradigm. That's the template. You cannot compare a 16-year-old child in Africa with a 16-year-old child in the USA or in Europe. Their way of thinking is different. Their way of looking at the world is different. A child in the US or in Europe at 16 years thinks of Africa or an African person as a beggar, as a poor person, as a person in need, and as a hopeless person. So we have to understand this, all sons and daughters of Africa, in the continent and in the diaspora. We are not poor. We have everything that we need. And what we do not have, we have got the ability to acquire. So unlike what the Western mainstream media outlets have conditioned us over time to believe, we are not a sick and dying poor continent. Let me give you some statistics. The GDP of the European Union, all countries in Europe combined, is equivalent to the GDP of the Democratic Republic of Congo alone. That means that the Congo has the ability to sustain, to father and mother the European Union. But then every time there is a story about Africa, it's always poverty, it's always hunger, it's always sickness, it's always disease, it's always war, it's always begging, it's always foreign aid. I mean, all these evils are meant to lower, to destroy our self-esteem, to destroy our spirit of nationalism, and to brand us indeed a continent of beggars. Another interesting fact: every year, the French government extracts more than $300 billion from West African nations. Think about that. Annually, West Africa gives or is looted of more than $300 billion, and all of that goes to the French treasury. How is it that a poor continent, and just not even a poor continent, but just a region of the African continent, can supply or can be reaped of more than $300 billion annually by the French? It means that it is a lie that we are poor. So it is up to you, African son and daughter, on the continent and in the diaspora, to understand what we've got and how we can leverage on the resources that we've got. I mean, let's face this. Africa is the seat of almost more than 30% of the world's natural resources that are used for making aircrafts and automobiles and car batteries and smartphones and computers and shoes and clothing. I mean, without Africa, the production in the entire world would be paralyzed. If there was a lockdown on the natural resources, the natural reserves of the African continent, the entire globe will come down to its knees. That's the power of the African continent. And make no mistake about it, whoever controls the African continent controls the entire world. Colonialism is up to us to reverse. To break that yoke, we have got to come together and start taking affirmative action. That's all we have time for today on this episode. Be sure to tune in next time. And a very big, thank you to our African Diaspora News Channel partners, our family of partners, to our viewers in Asia, in Europe, in the Americas, across the African continent, in the Middle East, in the Caribbean islands. Be sure to catch us next time. This is the Africa Today broadcast, and I'm your host, Douglas Madrega. We are coming to you live from the BTM television studios right here in Kampala, Uganda, East Africa. We are live every Saturday, 9 to 9:30 p.m. See you next time, and thank you for watching.